Hey, real quick, before we dive into today's episode, if you've been feeling like your brand needs a little love, but you're not quite sure where to start, I have just the tool you need. The Standout Brand Audit Bot is an AI-powered guided audit that shows you exactly what's working, what's not, and how to strengthen your brand using my proven Standout brand system. In 10 minutes or less, you'll walk away with clear next steps to move your brand forward with purpose. It's completely free. Just head to the show notes to grab the link and get started. One of my most favorite things about online business is making friends, connecting with really like-minded people that we meet on the internet, which sounds wild considering that 20 years ago our parents were telling us, don't talk to strangers, and that's what I do for work now. But I love it whenever I find a social post and I immediately am like, oh my gosh, I need to know this person. And that is exactly what happened when I read a Threads post by Brannan Arnett of Hone Creative Studio. Brannan is a mom of two. She's a creative director and brand designer. And I had such a great time meeting her on my podcast and talking all about why your visuals are actually not the most important part of your brand. And just kind of having a really candid conversation between two brand designers about what we're seeing in the industry, what we think matters and doesn't matter with your brand, and some words of wisdom that we would love to impart upon anyone who's considering investing in branding. So this conversation is really your opportunity to be a fly on the wall and hear what brand designers talk about when they get together. And I know you will learn a lot from this episode. Welcome to the Six Figure Brand Podcast, where each week we're pulling back the curtain on what it really takes to build a six-figure business as an online service provider. I'm your host, Morgan. I'm a branding expert, online agency owner, mom of two, and military spouse, and I'm obsessed with helping entrepreneurs like you understand the ins and outs of branding so that you can use it to grow your business without sacrificing your sanity. Whether you're just starting out or focused on scaling, we're diving into everything you need to build a profitable and sustainable online business. Let's get to it. Welcome back to another episode of the Six Figure Brand Podcast. I have a fellow brand designer, Brannan Arnett, here with me. Her business is Hone Creative Studio. And we met on Threads and shared a really popular, unpopular opinion. So we're going to talk about that today, but we don't know each other at all. So this is going to be a fun way for everyone to listen in and get to know what brand designers talk about when we think nobody's listening. So welcome, Brannan. Thanks so much for being here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your business and how you got into online business and brand design to start us out?
Yeah, of course. Okay, so I have been running Hone for a little over 5 years. We used to be called Golden Hour Designs. We rebranded back in 2023 after I first became a mom, and like everything shifted and became so clear, and the drive was there behind that moment. And prior to that moment completely, I was working part-time in my business, and I was working part-time initially as the brand manager and then eventually as director of brand development for a nationwide franchise that served children and their families. It's a drop-in creative arts learning center for children. It's a really unique and pretty incredible concept. And I really, 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 really loved that work and hit a moment when I was 7 months pregnant with my daughter, where I was just like, I can't do this anymore. And it was purely value misalignment. So with myself and the founder, we were clear on the direction for the most part that we wanted to take the business, but being kind of like her right-hand gal, there was just tension building, and not in a negative sense, but in just like I wanted to do certain things in a particular way as it related to kind of driving the overall brand development across all the markets we were serving. And she, I think, was at a kind of fork in the road of like, how big do we want to go and where do we want to take things? And so still hires my business, still work with her, still love her, but was no longer a great fit for that role. And so that role really ties back to a lot of the work that I did prior to that, which is actually, to me, one of the most interesting connections that I can make to brand strategy and brand design as a whole is I worked as a preschool and kindergarten teacher for a decade. And people are always like, how are you going to connect this to your work in brand strategy and brand design? And I promise it makes so much sense when you think about it. As a kindergarten and a preschool teacher for a decade before I took on those roles. So I think that's the really neat part about my journey is that I started off in the classroom. I have a master's in early childhood education. And a lot of my work in the classroom was about building trust and building relationships with children. Because what I know to be true in my 10 years in the classroom is children will not learn from you if they do not trust you, if they do not feel respected by you, if they do not feel seen and considered by you. And the same things that we utilize to build trust with young children are a lot of the same things that we utilize to build trust brand to brand and, brand to consumer. So I find that like such a fascinating overlap. And that's why when I stepped into that role, I started off like in marketing, and then we transitioned me to like more of a part-time to full-time role as that director of brand development and brand manager. I worked for that company for a little over 5 years, and I love the overlap there because it allowed me to like really hone these skills in a place where everything that I was talking about and selling made a lot of sense to me. So that's my journey. I woke up one day when I was 7 months pregnant and was like, I want to do my own thing. I'm ready to go out on my own. I have such a clear vision for what I want to do. And I spent the last like 2.5, almost 3 years, I guess in February, really being all in on my business. And I really love what we do. And I feel like kind of where you'll find us now is really stepping more into the strategy piece of branding, and how, to me, that's just like the foundation of everything that we do. And I'm sure that's going to be a big piece of what we talk about today. So that's my journey, kind of moving backwards and then trying to kind of bring it all back together.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks so much for sharing. There's so many things that you said that I want to talk about. First and foremost, you mentioned how your previous employer, who you left for like many reasons, but that she's still a client of yours. And I think that is something that, I don't know, maybe I just want to shed some light on, because for a long time, my last 9 to 5 that I worked was also a freelance client of mine after I had left. And I think that in the online business world, a lot of us are like, screw our 9 to 5s. Like, they want to like walk out of the building and blaze a fire and burn the bridge and never talk to people again. And it doesn't have to be that way.
100%.
I had a great experience working as a contractor for my 9 to 5. And it was honestly a really good like transition point, I think. So I think that's something that I just would encourage people, that like maybe your corporate job that you hate and you can't wait to leave and whatever could be a good fit as a client as you're like transitioning out. And I wished that more people would have been talking about that when I left my 9 to 5, because just because it's not a good fit in full-time employment capacity doesn't mean that there's not still room for collaboration. So I love that you mentioned that.
Yeah.
The other thing that I was vigorously nodding my head when you were talking about was how being a preschool and kindergarten teacher relates to brand design. And I loved what you said about like building trust and all of that stuff. But I think the other thing too is you learn so much about how to communicate to somebody that does not understand what you're saying at all, basically. And I think you'll relate to this when I say that clients come to us because they have no idea about branding or what their brand should look like. And that's an objection that I deal with a lot, that people are like, well, I can't hire you because I don't know what I want. And I'm over here like, well, you're not supposed to know what you want. That's why you hire me. And so there's a lot of having to like literally and figuratively get on their level to help them understand some of that. And I think that having a preschooler myself is a huge part of what you do as a preschool teacher. So when you were like, I swear it relates, I was like, oh, heck yeah, it relates.
Well, I love that. I had actually never considered that. I think a lot about like the concisely and cohesively. To me, those are like, I used to talk about like the 3 C's of branding: concisely, cohesively, and of course, I'm going to forget the third one right now. But I talked about that a lot in my early years because that made so much sense to my brain, especially working with like earlier stage entrepreneurs who, yeah, like exactly what you're saying, like didn't know what they wanted, didn't know what they should want, and didn't even really know where to begin. And communicating it concisely, I think, is one of the hardest parts when you're like a solo entrepreneur, freelancer, or even like starting to build a team. And I talk about that a lot with clients too, where I'm like, you're supposed to come to me and just like dump everything on the table, and I'm going to help you sort through like what makes sense and what goes well together and what creates that sense of cohesion, and like what we're just going to kind of toss off to the side and not use.
Yep. And like I'm a big analogy girl. So the way that I always am framing it to my clients is like, look, when you go to the chiropractor, you don't say like, this vertebrae is popped out of place and my hips are misaligned and blah, 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 blah. You say, my back hurts or my hips hurt, and they figure out what's wrong and work with you on how to fix it. Same thing if you're hiring like a nutritionist. You say, hey, like my gut is jacked up. I need help. You don't tell them, oh, here's specifically what's wrong. That's their job.
Yeah.
Similarly, it is our job to figure out, okay, here are maybe some of the pain points you're experiencing. Here's what you're like goal is here's who your audience is, and we tell them what their brand should be to achieve all of those things. So it's just interesting how much we get held back by thinking we don't know enough, but that's why you hire somebody, is because you're not supposed to know.
Yeah, I love the analogy of the chiropractor. I think that really resonates.
So you mentioned that kind of where you're headed in 2026 is a strong focus more on the strategy piece of branding, which is what we're going to talk about today. I kind of went on that journey myself in like 2024 and 2025 of, okay, I'm tired of just designing logos for people. And then like 2 or 3 years later, I go to look them up and see how they're doing, and they've like closed their business or they've rebranded like 5 or 6 times in between or whatever. They were happy with the work I did for them, but I just felt like I wanted to be doing work that got my clients more traction kind of, and like had more longevity. So that's when I really dove deep into the strategy piece, which brings us to the thread that we connected on. So I'm going to read it for our listeners. Brannan posted, it was in November. She said, I've been designing brands for 5+ years, and I have to say that I do not think your visual identity is the most important piece of your brand, and I'm ready to talk about it a lot.
And then I said nothing else after that.
And then life started lifing and she kind of fell off. But I commented on there and was like, OMG, we have to talk about this on my podcast. So that's what we're going to talk about today. For me, and I'm going to be super curious to check in with you in a few months and see like how this transition has gone for you. But if I'm being fully transparent, it has been really hard to, I'm going to use the word educate people on why they need strategy. Everyone wants a pretty logo or a new color palette or a new website, and they're happy to pay for that. But it has been a journey figuring out how to help them understand why the reason why they've done that 10 times and it's not working is because they keep skipping the strategy piece.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Okay. So to be very clear, I have offered strategy the entire time I've been in business. At different times, I've played with making it like a non-negotiable of the packages and the work that we do. And inevitably, as business ebbs and flows, motherhood, takes over my summers, and I like to take some time off around the holidays. I'll take on some projects that are just purely visual identity because the client's a good fit. I'm excited about the business. Their budget's not there. I also like on the side of this, I also want to say that I think there's a lot of like check marks that people need to hit before they're really ready to invest in the level of strategy that I want to do and that we offer. And sometimes it's like not a good fit. Sometimes you're just not there. And so I've had many reasons for being like, okay, let's just move with a visual identity. That's going to get you to the next place. And it has. And those people do come back and maybe still aren't ready to go full strategy because they feel like what they have is carrying them. And like, that's actually also part of kind of this thread is like, yeah, you don't really need to come back to me and rebrand if you're really taking off online. Like I'm thinking of one particular client who we moved through like a mini package of strategy and I audited like her visual identity because her budget just wasn't there. And she just like absolutely took off online and her social content grew her page tremendously. A lot of her work is like bookings virtually, and she just like didn't need a website. She didn't need a rebrand. And so it's one of those situations where it was like, I think that's a good example of like, yeah, your visual identity actually isn't the most important thing right now. Like your voice, your offerings, the way your content resonates. She got offered a handful of partnerships and pursued a lot of them. And so I think that was really meaningful. But to bring us back to kind of like what you were asking me, I agree. I also have found that to be a challenge to sell the strategy piece, especially when it's on the table to not do it. And so, yes, I would love to check back in a couple of months because I have kind of hit that fork in the road myself of I'm not really interested in doing work that doesn't have a strong foundation because of exactly all the reasons that you said. Like, it's where is it going? What are we doing? Why are we doing this? Yeah. So, I mean, I have some ideas on how I'm going to solve this and I could happily share those and we could poke holes in them or talk through them. But I'm with you. Like, when the option, and I don't know how your packages are structured, but like when the option is on the table to like not do strategy, I think people are going to opt for it. I think it's interesting because people both can say, I don't know how to like sell my services and I don't know how to concisely share messaging, etc. And then they can also say that they'll be fine without the strategy piece, which solves those problems.
Yeah. So for me, the kind of like final straw, and I did exactly what you did. So I started out doing just any and all graphic design.
Mhm.
And then I kind of niched down into like logos, branding, websites, and did that for a long time. And like, frankly, had a really easy time selling my services. Like I was busy pretty quickly and that was great. And then had some like burnout. I had kids, life was doing its thing. And I had like, I'm gonna say like 3 projects in the span of maybe like 6 or 8 months that just like went really sideways on me. And the common thread between them was that they didn't have like any sort of a brand strategy. They were just, here, this is what I want it to look like. And I was trying to make that. And then they either didn't like it or like in a lot of cases, there was probably other things going on internally with their companies that I was not privy to. But I kind of just like got fed up. I had just had my second baby and I was like, I don't have time for this anymore. Like, you're not having a good time. I'm not having a good time. It's stressful. I'm taking time away from my kids to work on this project that is not going to actually help you grow your business. So we have to do strategy first. So then I started what you said, like a mandatory strategy session at the beginning of the project. And that was good for a while. I have now transitioned to you book a strategy session by itself. And then at the end of the strategy session, I will make a recommendation as to whether or not you even need design. And if so, what the best option for you would be, whether it's like full branding, mini brand package, just some website updates, maybe a VIP day. I also have a membership for people who are very budget conscious and want to DIY some of that stuff. And how I came to that was I had, again, this happened a few times, a couple of clients who, after their strategy session, I kind of realized the design package they bought from me is not actually what they need. Or like they're not actually an ideal client or whatever. And if I had just done the strategy session, I would have known that and been able to guide them better. So where the sticking point though has been for me is I think that clients get hung up on, well, why would I pay you for a strategy session when I could just go to another designer and pay them and just get my brand like faster?
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's like they're going there saying my back hurts and this person's going to fix my back. And you're like, well, actually, let's do a full body scan and see if there's anything like contributing to like your back hurting.
Yeah, exactly. So that's been interesting for me. And the clients who get it, get it. And every single person is like, that was the most productive 90 minutes I've spent on my business in a long time. So that is reassuring. And it's a transition for sure. And I think we like collectively are kind of waking up to the fact that a pretty logo is a Band-Aid solution. It will like give you a dopamine high and you'll be really excited to share it. But then what happens 6 months from now? So I think that's good. But like you said, I don't think the visuals are the most important part. I just recorded a couple days ago, so it'll come out before your episode comes out, chat about why your logo is probably never going to be as recognizable as like Apple or Nike or whatever. But that's what, and I don't know if this is your experience, that's what everyone tells me they want. And I want to shake them and be like, no, that's not actually what you want.
Okay, wait, I was going to ask you this while you were talking. I have 2 questions for you. Okay, do you find that clients are like, I like this color. Like, this is my favorite color. This is meaningful to me. I always use this like outlandish example with clients of like, I like purple frogs. And so I want my logo to be a purple frog. And it's like, I don't know. I just like, and again, this is like depending on who your audience is or who you're currently attracting or have attracted in the past. But like, is that also your experience that people want their logos to be like some visual representation of something that's meaningful to them?
Yes and no. I would say it's kind of 50-50. Sometimes I have that and they're like, this thing is meaningful to me or these colors or whatever. That was actually exactly the experience that I had with one of those clients that I was like, okay, no, we're doing the strategy session separate first because I would have been able to suss that out.
Yeah.
That it was their clients are moms like you and me, but it's 2 men who run the company and they were like, we want our logo to be brown and green and have like a silhouette of a man in it. And I was like, okay, well, and this was like not my proudest brand designer moment, but finally I just threw my hands up and was like, fine, whatever. I'm just going to make you what you want. And I don't know how that went. I'm not working with them anymore. Like it was a whole thing. But yeah, so sometimes that's the case. Other times I get people that are like, I don't know what I don't know kind of a thing. I'll know it when I see it, which is also when strategy can be helpful because then I'm like, okay, well, usually through talking with them enough, I can like pull some things out. For me, unless they're truly like a personal brand for an influencer or something, which I don't have to work with a lot, I feel like it should be a balance, right? Like the purpose of your brand is to connect you with your ideal client. So there needs to be a little bit of both. So I do ask some questions of like, is there any symbols that are important to you or anything like that I can very subtly weave in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
of
do have
course.
the conversation of like, I get that your favorite color is neon pink and orange and whatever, but if your client is, middle-aged C-suite businessmen, then that's
Yeah.
probably not going to work.
Yeah. That makes me think of, I think, one of the most powerful questions, and I'm sure this is, a pretty universal experience in the strategy world, to me is just why,
Yeah.
oh, I want my colors to be neon pink and neon green, like you said. And it's kind of just like, I'm not going to tell you that's wrong, but like, tell me why. Because if we can't tie it back to something meaningful and like needle moving, why would we do it?
Yeah.
Okay. My other question for you is like, in response to my thread, like what do you think is more important than your logo? And I know that's like such a heavy question.
Yeah, no, I can answer it. So I think your whole strategy is more important than your logo. But specifically, if I had to pick, like, I'll say 3 things. But I think number 1, for sure, first and foremost, is your ideal client. Like, everything you're doing is for them. If you don't know who that is, you are really just throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping that it works. And probably it won't, or it will be like a lot more work than it needs to be. So that's number 1. Number 2, I think, is your brand values, because I think that is the thing that like makes your brand human and helps people connect with you. And really, I think is probably the biggest driver of how your visuals look, which is the like pretty sexy thing that people want. So for example, if you value like making people feel like grounded and like they trust you and whatever, then you're going to use very different colors than if your values are like being high energy and motivating people or something. That's a really basic example. So that's number 2.
That makes sense.
Number 3 is your client experience, I think. Like you can do everything right, and if you drop the ball actually working with your clients, none of it matters. So that would be my 3. What do you think?
That's a great question. Honestly, and I say it's such a heavy question because I feel like I could go on and on and on and on and on about it. I think a lot of things matter. I think that they all matter to varying degrees, but then I also think the collection of these things that I'll name in a second, I think the collection of these things working together is what matters, and the consistency of them working together and the cohesion of them working together. I think a lot about, like, I'll name the like obvious ones. So like positioning, language, like your tone of voice, the words you use, how you communicate with your audience. So using that as an example, the consistency of that over time builds trust or doesn't. That alongside, obviously your visuals and like color psychology and the font pairings and the way that those things work together or don't. Your ideal client, obviously, to me is like the underlay of all of that. Like that's what that's all based on. And then the experience to me is huge. Like when you said that, it was just kind of like, yeah, like you could deliver like such a premium client experience and have the world's most terrible logo or just like basic, meaningless, like not memorable at all logo, and you could still find great success in business.
Mm-hmm.
The way that you kind of carry people through that experience to me is probably the most important piece, because you could have all of these other things, and if that's terrible, you're not going to grow. You're not going to continue to get aligned clients and bring them into your world. Values, I think, are huge. To me, values are like your North Star. They're the thing that dictates so many of these other things. But I think one of the things that I feel like I've realized over the last few years in business, and honestly struggle with myself a lot, except for when I'm talking, like once I'm in a world with a client, like I'm very much myself, we can chat. All of this conversation comes very naturally. But like you were saying, it's like, how do I share this on socials and how do I kind of like sell this piece? To me is like the energy that comes from a brand, especially like a small team or like a single kind of like founder brand, is like, I used to say this a lot. And like, it's like that classic example of like talking to myself. But like, if you don't buy what you're selling, why would I buy what you're selling? And so I think it's a lot of things. It's the visuals, and you know what that encompasses. It's like your content, your voice, your values, your positioning. But I really think that energy, like the energy that you bring forth all of that with. And then how is that all brought to life consistently, cohesively? Yeah, I don't know. I guess maybe consistently is the best word. Just never endingly. So to me, it's so much, which can feel and sound overwhelming. And also I feel like gives you a lot of space to like find success and a lot of space to just like keep plugging in. So a really big answer But that was a lot of the work that I did. And when I was in my like more corporate role, did a lot of like strategy trainings because I didn't understand at first how to bring all of those pieces together. And the visuals to me were like, they were a part of my job, overseeing like the visual content that we put out. Yeah. In that role as well, it was a lot of like, I like this font, I like this color. And you're like, okay, but that doesn't have anything to do with our target audience. And that doesn't have anything to do with expressing our values. And like, that's not the color we used 6 months ago. That's a random new color. So it was really easy, I think, once I was able to kind of build this web in my mind of like what really mattered, to see where that value misalignment was happening in that role of just like, oh, like we're not sticking to the strategy and we don't care to. And like you said, like, I know where this is going.
Is your brand feeling a little off? Like your visuals, messaging, and your overall vibe just are not lining up with where your business is headed? You probably don't need another pretty logo. You actually need a solid strategy behind your brand. That's exactly what we'll build together inside the Standout Brand Strategy session, a one-on-one deep dive into your brand foundation so that you can finally show up with clarity, consistency, and confidence. And if you're thinking about working with Spect & Co. on branding or web design, this is your first step for every single project that we do together. Clients who have gone through this process have tripled their audience size, doubled their revenue, and raised their rates by 30% or more. Use the link in the show notes to book your session, and don't forget to enter code SFBPOD at checkout to save $100.
Not far.
Yeah, not far. Yeah, man, there's like so many things that you keep saying that I'm like, oh, I want to talk about that and that and that and that. We're going to be here all day.
I'm sorry, I have so much to say about this.
I know. Yeah. So, and I think too, I want to also talk about in regard to your visuals, what is the most important, because I don't think it's your logo. So
yeah.
We'll come back to that in a second. But I think, like you said, all this can sound really overwhelming, right? Like when I'm making my sales page for a strategy session, I'm like, oh, purpose, mission, vision, values, ideal client, competitor analysis, differentiator, blah, 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 on and on and on, messaging, voice, all these things. And then I'm like, this is going to scare somebody away. This is so much work.
Honestly, I think it does.
It totally is. And I think that, I mean, just to like plug both of our own services, that's why you hire somebody, because we make it feel like not a lot of work. I will tell you that every single client that has done a strategy session with me in the last like 2 years has said some version of like, I was nervous or scared or this felt overwhelming, but it was so much fun. When you have somebody that knows what they're doing, kind of holding your hand through the process, it really is fun. But you also don't have to do it all at once, right? So if you're like just starting out, or you talked in the beginning about clients who maybe don't actually need the strategy because they're so new, I tell people frequently, less often the further I get in business, but I do still once in a while get inquiries from people that are like, I started my business 6 weeks ago, or I'm thinking about starting a business or whatever. Typically it's a referral. So it's a client like has worked with me and their sister-in-law wants to start a business and they're like, oh, you should talk to Morgan. And I tell them all the time, don't hire me yet. And that, like, yes, you can hire me and you can pay me like $3,000 to $6,000 for a brand and it will be a gorgeous brand. But what happens every time is that first 6 months to like 2 years in business, you're doing so much figuring it out of like, who do you want to work with? What services do you want to offer? Who is your audience? That you're going to have to come back and redo that work anyway. I have seen so many times, frequently they start as a VA that then they realize, oh, I really love doing ads, or I really love copywriting, or I really love this or that specialty, and they want to go down that road farther. And if they had invested a bunch of money in a general VA brand, they would have had to throw it all out. So in that case, I tell people, like, just DIY something that is good enough. I think, especially in the online world, all we have is our website and our social media, right? So we get really like precious about it and we think that it has to be perfect. And I really want to encourage people that it shouldn't look like a first grader did it, but also good enough is good enough to get started. So that also brings us to a good point of what I typically tell them to do is like choose some fonts, choose some colors, make a text-based logo, call it good, and come back to me in a year and a half. What do you think visually is the most important part of their brand? Because I know what my answer is 100%. So I'm curious if ours match.
No, I really loved everything you said, especially like one thing I want to call out, and then I'll answer your question, is this idea, and I'm so guilty of this, that we want to perfect the visual assets. We want to perfect the visual representation, the business card, the website, the social content. Well, and I'm thinking graphic social content. That all feels like the representation of our business. But in today's world, like for online businesses like ours, that's actually not necessarily, especially if you're relying on Instagram to if you're relying on social media to get leads, that's actually not, to me, where your impact is. And I think sometimes fixating on the visuals is like avoiding showing up, using your voice, like kind of staking claim on the space of authority that you could otherwise, kind of find yourself in. Okay, so to answer your question, I think, and I'm assuming like, just to have a clear answer, you're saying, or you're asking like online businesses, like, your NIs. I think the most important of the visual identity or of the brand as a whole?
The visual identity.
Oddly, your fonts and your colors. I think that when I look at a business like mine, when I go to market my services, when I go to share information, when I go to educate, like those are the things I'm going to reach for. Like you're probably pretty rarely going to see my logo. I don't even really like my logo. I myself put too much pressure on my logo. And so it's like, okay, let's just like take a break from tweaking it, because ultimately it's not the thing that people are connecting with. They're connecting with my colors. They're connecting with, like, to me, so much personality comes through in that header font and imagery. If you're going to invest in brand photography or videography or B-roll footage, like to me, those are my top three. You asked for one.
Yeah. No, mine are, I would have said them in a different order, but mine are the same. I would say colors first.
Okay.
And then
I agree. Yeah.
So I guess maybe tied with fonts and imagery. It's so tough because when somebody's investing in brand design, there's so many other things that they also need to invest in or should invest in or want to invest in to like really maximize the experience. So like I would love if every client could hire me for brand design and could also hire a copywriter for their website and could also hire a brand photographer. But that's like $15,000 of services on the low end. So I get it that that's not always realistic. But for me, and I'm a huge color psychology nerd, so this is a little bit specific to me, but your brain recognizes color faster than it recognizes anything else. I could show somebody Home Depot orange and Tiffany blue and like whatever else, and they would know exactly what businesses those are from based on just the colors. So I think that's the number one way that people can be consistent and recognizable for sure. Fonts, I think, also help you be recognizable, but more importantly, I think it's like a readability and like keeping things simple and consistent thing. I hate it when I go on somebody's Instagram, like their grid, and I'm like, oh my God, every post has a different font. What are you doing? Just pick one. It doesn't even matter which one, just choose one. And then photography, I think, is just one of the best ways to like bring your personality to life. And I get that that's not realistic for most of us, probably. Yeah. But in a perfect world, that's what I would say for sure. Your logo, like you said, doesn't even get used that much. Like I just recently revamped my Spect & Co logo and I like it fine, but I didn't like fall to my knees and be like, oh my God, this is the most beautiful logo I've ever designed. I literally was like, okay, this will work. Like, cool, done. It lives in the header of my website and then on like my contracts I send out and like some documents and stuff, but it's not anywhere on my social media. Like exactly like you said, we put so much pressure on our logo, but we don't use it that much. Like we're not Nike. It's not that important.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly about colors. I think there's so much emotion tied up in colors that like we just don't talk enough about. But like I personally like really resonate with the idea of like, I feel like I feel things really deeply and I think a lot. And so colors mean a lot to me. And you can just, at least for me, I don't want to like speak for the general population, but like I can just tell when a color palette feels disjointed and when it feels like you just kind of made it up. And sometimes there's like rhyme or reason to that because there's like color psychology and there's like, a balance that you're aiming to strike with a color palette. And then other times it's just like a gut instinct. And then I think that, I agree with you completely. Like the amount of illegible fonts that people use, like anytime I've done an audit, I'm like, get a thicker body copy font. That's going to do a lot for your website.
Make
like
it
just
bigger.
That. And they're like, bigger. Wow. I'm like, do less fonts, like it's always so interesting. Anytime I've done like audit work, like I did an audit before I went on my leave with someone that I know, low budget client, super clear on her target audience and could really answer all of those questions. I also want to be clear in terms of like this overall discussion. Like I do require everybody to have a strategy call that works with me. It's just whether or not like, do I give you then like a 40-page brand strategy deck? Because some people I'm like, I won't, like you've said, like I can't design a logo for you if I don't understand who we're trying to target. Do you need a 40-page deck identifying all of the things that are valuable 3 to 5 years into business? Probably not. Let's not waste either of our times, energies, or resources. But yes, I think like at minimum, it's like there just is a certain amount of information. And I loved what you said, where you were like, go DIY something and come back to me, or like go DIY it, come back to me, let me audit it, and then go kind of live in it. Yeah, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah. You just reminded me of a train of thought that I lost earlier. So thanks. You talked about like the energy of branding, but I also want to talk about the energy that clients bring to the project. I have another episode about this. I'm going to end up linking like 10 episodes in the show notes of this, but it's fine. About like branding from a place of abundance versus a place of desperation. I feel strongly that if you come to me and you're like, this is my last $2,000, I need a new brand to save my business, probably I'll tell you no at this point in my business. But
good for you. Take the pressure off all of us.
That's not the energy you want to be bringing to the table, because you're going to be second guessing yourself. You're going to be second guessing me. You're putting so much pressure on your brand to do than frankly it's really capable of. Like, yes, I can make you a beautiful and even a very strategic brand, but if you're not able to go execute on that, it doesn't mean anything. Versus somebody coming to me and saying, things are going really well with what I already have, and I'm ready to like step into that next version of my business and I want to work on my brand, is night and day difference. And it just makes me sad when people get to a place where they're like struggling so hard that they're grabbing at all these shiny objects trying to like fix their business. So my question for you is, what would you guide somebody to do in that situation instead of, Brannan, make me a logo so I can pay my rent next month?
Oh, gosh. I mean, it's such an interesting thing to think about. I think it'd be so situation specific. It's like, like your analogy earlier, this idea of like going to the chiropractor. It's like, where is the gap in your marketing? Oftentimes I think clarity in your messaging, again, it depends on what avenues we're using, but for the sake of answering your question, like someone in our line of work, like imagine a brand designer is, maybe coming to you or I and asking that kind of question and feeling stuck. Honestly, I think clarity in your messaging and clarity in your offers. And I mean, it's such a layered response, but like, do your offers make sense? Can you sell your offers? Can you talk about the outcome of your offers? Like, does your website guide people, And maybe my answer is like an audit, an overall like marketing or brand audit.
Yeah.
Because just like really trying to understand, where is there a gap in the process? Because there's got to be somebody's got to be looking at your Instagram. Somebody's got to be coming to your website. And if there's, if you think about the like initial touch point all the way through a discovery call and contract and, project booked, it's like, where are you losing people? Which to me, honestly, maybe even ties back to the idea of energy. And when I say energy, like I want to be clear, like I think you're understanding what I'm saying. But I just want to be crystal clear, like, are you able to show up online? Are you able to have those conversations? Are you able to convince people of the value of your work? Do you believe in the value of your work? And like, to kind of tie this side tangent I'm going on to something we both talked about earlier, like I struggled to sell my services when there wasn't strategy attached to it, because it was like, I don't believe in the value of this work. Like, I don't find this to be the best use of your resources. And so, maybe this puts a bow on my answer of just like, if somebody had $2,000 and they were like, I need a new logo, I would be like, a new logo is probably the last thing that you need. Maybe the answer is strategy. At minimum, some sort of audit to like more deeply understand where the wheels are falling off. But that's really interesting to think about, because I don't think the logo is going to save you. I think the logo is going to make you,
I think there's a little bit of nuance there, because I do think that in some cases, branding can really like inject some new life and some new energy into your business.
100%.
This happens to me all the time. Clients are like, I need a new brand or a new website or whatever, because every time someone asks for my website, I like cringe, or I don't want to pitch myself for things because my brand looks like crap or whatever. So then we do their rebrand and they like book all these new clients, or they get invited for a speaking engagement or whatever, not really because their brand looks better, but because they're showing up so much more confidently.
That's a great point.
So I think there is something to that. I just also think that I want to be really clear to people that if there are like big problems in your business, like you're not getting any clients or you have like money management issues or, who knows what, branding is not going to solve that. I think branding really is going to amplify whatever is already going on in your business, whether that's good or bad. So hopefully people know that we're saying that with love and that there are just other things you can do first, like do an audit, figure out if your offers are really what people want. Or one thing I always tell people is go talk to your people. Like, do you have any clients that have been good experiences that you can go back and say, first and foremost, do you have any friends like you that need my service? But also, what drove you to work with me? Get some of that feedback and start working that into your marketing and see if that makes a difference. So that's a huge one for me. But I think, and this is a perfect segue into the final thing that I want to talk about, there are so many designers that would take that last $2,000 and make them probably a decent brand and logo and website and whatever, and then be like, see ya, sorry, good luck. For me, one of my biggest pet peeves, I'm curious if you feel this way too, is that frequently I feel like I'm having to like rehabilitate our entire career field when I'm on a discovery call, because people are like, I paid a designer and they ghosted me, whatever, myriad of things that have gone wrong when they've hired somebody. Sorry, web designers, but I hear this more about website designers than I do about brand designers for some reason.
Interesting.
My big thing that just drives me bonkers, and I have like made it my life's mission to correct, is that people don't teach their clients how to actually use their brand. So they say, here's your logo, here's your color palette, here's your fonts, whatever, and a style guide, and like send them on their way. But these people are not designers. They don't know how to use a style guide. So I go through a lot of steps and extra effort to help educate them around that and make sure that they feel good actually building upon what we have created for them. I'm curious if there's anything that you have had clients come to you with a bad experience from another designer, or that you see other designers do that you're like, I wish we would stop doing that.
Oh, that's a good question. I also loved what you said about like the energy piece of like, sometimes a rebrand actually does breathe new life into a business and like actually can be really pivotal. I would agree with that too. Okay. What is something, gosh, I'd say the thing that like peeves me the most, and this is like maybe not even really a hot take, but just like the overlap in like this brand and that brand, like there's the kind of like way that trends can kind of just like infiltrate the scene. And like, I do feel, I feel like social content's a great way to like enact trends. Like I feel like there's a lot of overlays happening right now with like notes app screenshots and emojis. And I think that's a great way to like make fun and like not make fun, but like have fun with trends and like live out that fantasy or that like exciting moment. But I really don't when you see trendiness kind of come into someone's like visual brand, because it just feels like you're doing a disservice to your client. Your client's obviously looking to make some sort of sustainable investment in their visual identity. And when I'm imagining it's client driven, or maybe it's, personally fulfilling to have like a momentarily visually appealing brand. But that, I think that's the thing that irks me the most, is kind of just this feeling of like, this doesn't feel unique. This doesn't stand out. This feels like so-and-so's brand, or I've seen something like this, or like, I feel like purple and red are having a moment right now together. And like, I love it. I got a clutch. It's purple and red. Like, that's where I'm having fun with trends, not in my visual brand. So I would say that. And then in terms of like people coming to me and like having bad experiences, I don't know. None stick out. Also, like, I can't fathom ghosting someone. Like, how do you sleep at night? That gives me so much anxiety. Yeah. But I feel like you do hear about it a lot. Like, you hear about, you do. But I can't think of anything. I've only had like, I would say like 2 or 3 sticky client experiences. I've definitely had friction in the process where, things got out of scope. I felt frustrated. A client felt frustrated, but usually we were able to kind of like come to a resolution. I think I can only think of like 2 sticky client situations where I had to dissolve the relationship, and that was like not received well, but was like very much necessary.
Yeah. I think we've all had those experiences. I have, and I've talked about it on the podcast before, like very openly. And I wish that more of us would say that. And it's so funny because like, I think in other areas of our life or other places that we hire people, that happens and it's not that big of a deal. Like you sign up for a gym membership and you go for 3 months and then you realize you don't actually like that gym. So you cancel your membership. Like, cool, no hard feelings. Sometimes things don't work out. So I appreciate that you said that. And I too hate a trendy brand. I get it. People think that my hypothesis is that people see some big creator or business owner's brand and they're like, I want that because if I look like them, then I will be successful. It's kind of like the business version of when we're in middle school and we're like, oh, I need to dye my hair or wear these clothes or do this and then I'll be cool. It doesn't work that way. You blend in for sure. I've had many clients say that they specifically have hired me because I don't like a super defined style. All the brands I design look very, very, very different from each other. And I think that that's a strength of mine. I've felt a little bit of imposter syndrome around that at various times in my career because I'm like, well, these other people do have, like, they are the designer for whimsical brands or illustrated brands or whatever. And I don't have that. So it must mean that I'm like not as much of an artist or something. But now I realize that like, oh, that's a strength because not every single brand I put out there is going to look the same. Somebody can come to me and say, I want this. And 99% of the time I can create it versus somebody who is a true artist. And the example I'm going to use is like a tattoo artist, for example. You go to whatever tattoo artist because you like their style and that's what you want. I don't think that that's what a good brand designer is.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of different ways to like niche as a designer, but I do think it gives a different layer of credibility to your approach of like, I'm going to design the brand that's best suited for you, for your stage of business, for your target audience, your values, etc., and your services in your industry, rather than like, I feel like if you have a really niche style, you're expecting and you kind of need people to know when they come to you that like that's the kind of brand that they're looking to emulate, like that style. And you probably wouldn't find that out until you're like deep in the strategy process of like, oh, this is actually not, my style is actually not the style that you need. So I think that your approach, and it's an approach that we take similarly, gives a lot more credibility to the outcome, to the like willingness to kind of do whatever is best suited for the client.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, just to like tie a bow on this conversation, we started out talking about what's the most important part of your brand. And we both agreed that it's your ideal client. Like that's really what it's all about, I think. And especially if you come from like a creative or an artist background or whatever, it's kind of hard to separate the two, I feel like. So for somebody that's looking for a brand designer, first hire one of the two of us. But second of all, I think that that's an important thing to ask them is like, is this going to be in your style or is this going to be what I want? Among other things. There are many other questions you should ask, but I think that's a big one that if you don't live in our world, you don't know to even think about.
Yeah. Something else I feel like called to attention, at least in my mind, is this idea that I feel like being in business and working for yourself is this like never ending personal development journey. I feel like there's several things you've said where you're just like, yeah, it's difficult to, separate yourself or like know what that $2,000 needs to go towards. It's something I think about a lot. It's just kind of like you're meeting yourself again and again and again. And if you're not able to get out of your own way and see things in a really objective, like business sense, you're really not going to grow. And like you referenced the designer that might take the money and it's like, yeah, because they might also be in that position of like, I need to pay my rent this month. And so I think it's interesting to think about that, like everybody just kind of like finds themselves in the audience and in this, kind of like segment of wherever they are in business. And ideally each hire helps you grow, but maybe sometimes it helps you figure out what you don't need.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, that was such a fun conversation. I feel like we could keep
going.
2 more. Tell us
awesome.
Where we can connect with you and how we can work together.
Hone Creative Studio on Instagram, Hone Creative Studio on Pinterest, and honecreativestudio.com. We work in kind of like a tiered approach. So it starts with brand strategy. Everything starts with brand strategy, then brand identity on top, then copywriting and web design. And then from there, we have ongoing design containers where we continue to support clients in kind of a fractional brand management role. So yeah, kind of start to finish. You start with that strategy and you end with that, full brand launch or just kind of like ongoing design containers after that. And to me, that's where all the magic happens, is in the consistency and the continuity of everything that you create, in the strategy container.
Yeah, for sure. Agree. 10 out of 10. So if you are a mom business owner, you will definitely want to connect with Brannan. We did not have time to get into each of our motherhood business owner journeys. Maybe I'll have you back in a few weeks to talk about. But yeah, moms, you will resonate with Brannan's threads content. I can assure you. All right. Cool. Thanks for being here. Thanks for tuning in to the Six Figure Brand Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to rate the show and leave a review on whatever app you're listening on. And as a thank you, I'll send you coffee on me. Yes, I'm serious. As a smaller show for now, you taking the time to do this makes a huge impact on how we can reach more people and how I can continue to create this content for free. When you take a screenshot of your review, follow and tag me on Instagram at @SpectandCo. I'll send you a $5 Starbucks gift card. As always, don't forget to check out the show notes for any links or resources I mentioned during the episode. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you next week.